The twin suns of Orion 9 hung low over the mining colony, painting everything in shades of orange and rust. Wind carried dust through the narrow streets between the metal huts. It was another hard day in the settlement where humans and aliens worked side by side. Though side by side was never truly equal, Lyra walked slowly through the busy market road. Her small feet left light marks in the dust. She was not human. Her skin had a faint silver tone, her hair pale like moonlight, and her eyes shimmered softly with a blue glow. She wore an old worker's cloth, torn at the sleeves, and carried a small pouch made from scrap fabric. Every step she took made people look away or whisper behind her back. She had been on this planet for 2 years. After her homeworld was destroyed in a border conflict, surviving aliens were scattered across colonies. Some became slaves, some beggars, some vanished in the mines. Lyra had survived by doing small repairs for food, fixing small machines no one else cared about. That day she went to buy dry bread from the market. She placed a few metal coins on the counter, but the vendor, a large man with rough hands, frowned at her. "These coins are fake," he said loudly. Lyra shook her head. "No, sir, they are real. I worked for them." "Don't lie to me, alien," he shouted. "You stole these from my box?" People around turned their heads. In a moment, the crowd gathered. A few miners laughed, others joined in, eager for trouble. Lyra stepped back in fear, but someone grabbed her arm. The vendor pulled her forward and threw her down on the ground. Dust rose around her. Stones and old metal pieces dug into her knees. The crowd began to shout, "Thief! Dirty alien! Teach her a lesson." Lyra tried to explain, her voice trembling. "I didn't steal. Please, I worked for these coins." But no one listened. The vendor kicked the coins away and they rolled into the dirt. A miner stepped forward and pushed her shoulder. Another threw a small stone that hit her arm. The sting made her cry out. For a moment she wished she could disappear. The noise around her grew louder, like a storm of hate. Her people had faced this before, but she never thought she would be alone against it. Her eyes filled with tears, but she held her arms around her head, waiting for it to end. Then, through the noise, a calm voice came. "That's enough." The crowd froze. The voice belonged to a tall human man standing near the workshop road. He wore a brown jacket covered in oil stains and dust, the kind used by mechanics. His hair was dark and short, his face tired but strong. His name was Ethan Cole, man once known as a soldier, but now just a worker who fixed broken machines. He walked closer, his boots crunching in the dust. His eyes, gray and steady, looked over the crowd. "What's happening here?" he asked. The vendor crossed his arms. "This alien thief stole from me." Ethan looked at the coins lying on the ground. He bent down, picked one up, and wiped it clean. He turned it over and showed it to the vendor. "This coin's old, scratched, and marked with her initials. Looks to me like she earned it." "She's lying," said a miner. Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Do you have proof?" The miner hesitated, then looked away. The crowd muttered, but no one answered. Ethan knelt beside Lyra. She was shaking dirt on her face and arms. "Can you stand?" he asked softly. She nodded weakly, and he helped her to her feet. The people around watched in silence. "She's just a girl," Ethan said firmly. "You all should be ashamed." The vendor grunted. "You defend her because you pity her. You don't know what these creatures are capable of." Ethan turned toward him, his tone cold, but calm. "I know what humans are capable of. That's enough for me." No one spoke. The wind blew through the market, lifting dust between them. Finally, the vendor muttered something under his breath and walked away. The others followed one by one until only Ethan and Lyra were left standing in the quiet street. Lyra looked up at him. Her voice was soft. "Why did you help me?" Ethan smiled faintly. "Because it was the right thing to do." He offered her his hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her fingers were cold and trembling. Together, they walked away from the market. Ethan's workshop was small, built from old ship parts and metal panels. The smell of oil and burnt circuits filled the air. Machines half taken apart were scattered on tables. You can sit there, he said, pointing to a bench. You look hurt. Lyra sat quietly, still in shock. She touched the small bruise on her arm. Ethan poured water into a metal cup and handed it to her. She drank slowly, eyes still wide with fear. Do you live here alone? She asked after a while. He nodded. Mostly. People around don't like visitors. She looked down. I know that feeling. Ethan began to clean her wound gently with a cloth. You're not from around here, are you? Lyra shook her head. No, my home was destroyed. My people were taken to different worlds. I was sent here. Do you have anyone left? No one, she whispered. Ethan said nothing. He understood loneliness. Once, during the wars, he had lost his crew when their ship was attacked. Since then, he had lived quietly, fixing machines and keeping to himself. After a while, he spoke again. You're safe here tonight. Tomorrow, we'll see what to do next. Lyra's eyes softened. Thank you, human. He smiled slightly. Name's Ethan. You can call me that. She repeated it slowly. Ethan. That night, she slept on a small cot in the corner of his workshop. For the first time in many months, she felt warmth not from machines or lights, but from kindness. Morning came with a pale yellow sky. Ethan was already working on a power converter when Lyra woke. She watched him silently. His hands moved with skill, his face calm. Good morning, he said when he noticed her. There's bread on the table. She smiled a little and took a piece. Thank you, he nodded. You said you used to repair things? A little, she replied. Small machines. My father taught me before. Her voice trailed off. Ethan handed her a small tool. Then maybe you can help me with this. What? She looked surprised. You trust me? He shrugged. You've got steady hands. Let's find out. They worked side by side for hours. Lyra was careful and quiet, but soon she began to ask questions about the tools and machines. Ethan explained patiently. He noticed her quick understanding, how she listened, and tried again until she got it right. At midday, they took a break. Outside, the sky shimmered with heat. The colony was still busy, but people stared less now when she walked with him. Rumors spread fast, and everyone knew Ethan Cold, the man who once fought pirates and defended the colony's border. Few dared to argue with him. Why do you live here? She asked. Ethan looked toward the horizon. I wanted peace. After the war, I didn't want to fight anymore. This place was quiet enough. She tilted her head. Is it still quiet? He smiled faintly. Not anymore. Lyra laughed softly for the first time. The sound was small but warm, like sunlight through dust. Ethan found himself smiling too. As days passed, Lyra helped around the workshop. She cleaned tools, fixed small devices, and even repaired a broken generator that had frustrated Ethan for weeks. He began to see her not as a stranger, but as someone with courage hidden beneath fear. But not everyone was pleased. The colony overseer, Varric, heard about the alien girl staying with a human. He was a man of strict control, known for his cruelty. One evening he came to the workshop with 2 guards. Ethan Cole, he said coldly. You're sheltering property that belongs to the colony. Ethan looked up from his workbench. She's not property. She's a person. Varric smirked. The law says otherwise. She's registered as labor. Hand her over. Lyra stood frozen behind the work table. Ethan stepped forward, blocking Varric's view. You'll have to go through me, he said quietly. Varric laughed. You think you can stop me? Ethan's eyes didn't waver. Try me. The guards shifted uncomfortably. They had heard stories about Ethan, the human who fought off pirates single-handed during the border war. Varric sneered, but decided not to push further that night. You'll regret this, Cole, he said before leaving. When they were gone, Lyra whispered, you didn't have to risk yourself. He looked at her seriously. I'm not risking myself. I'm doing what's right. That night, she couldn't sleep. She watched the stars through the small window. They reminded her of her lost home, but also of something new, a spark of hope the next day. Ethan took her to the edge of the colony. Beyond the walls stretched the open desert, wide and silent. Old machines from forgotten wars lay half buried in sand. Someday, he said, maybe you'll go wherever you want. No one will stop you. Lyra looked at the endless land. And you. He smiled. I'll probably still be fixing things. She turned to him. Maybe I'll help. He laughed softly. Maybe you will. For a long time, they stood there in silence, the wind blowing around them. Lyra felt lighter, as if the dust no longer clung to her heart. The memory of the crowd, the pain, the fear, all of it, began to fade. What remained was the moment when one human had stepped between her and the world's cruelty, as the sun sank again behind the dunes. She whispered to herself, maybe humans aren't so bad after all. Ethan, standing beside her, glanced over. What was that? She shook her head quickly, hiding a small smile. Nothing. He grinned. Thought so? They walked back toward the colony, side by side. Two unlikely souls bound not by blood or race, but by a simple act of kindness that would echo far beyond the dusty streets of Orion-9. And though neither of them knew it yet, this was only the beginning of a story that would soon reach the stars. The next few days passed quietly in Ethan's small workshop. The noise from the marketplace faded, but something had changed in the air. People whispered about the human who stood up for an alien girl. Some said he was foolish. Others said he was brave. Lyra stayed close to the workshop, afraid of drawing attention again. But she began to feel safer with each sunrise. Ethan fixed machines as usual. Lyra helped him clean metal parts, polish tools, and test power lines. She moved carefully, always listening, always learning. Her silver eyes followed every motion of his hands. She wanted to understand humans better, their strange mix of kindness and anger, fear and courage. Sometimes at night she sat outside on the dusty steps, looking up at the sky. The stars reminded her of her homeworld, now gone. She often thought about her parents. She could still hear her mother's soft voice telling her that one day, even in the darkest place, light could return. Maybe this was that light, a quiet human with oil on his hands and sadness in his eyes one morning. Ethan gave her a small metal piece. You've got good hands, he said. Try fixing this connector. The wires are a mess. Lyra smiled a little. I'll try. She sat beside him, her fingers moving slowly but with care. When she finished, he tested the machine. It worked perfectly. See? He said with a grin. Told you. You've got talent. Lyra's heart warmed. You really think so? I don't say things I don't mean, he replied simply. The days became a pattern of peace. She learned how to weld, how to repair batteries, how to read human blueprints. Ethan even showed her an old Earth radio, and when soft music played through it, Lyra listened with wonder. The melodies were unlike anything she had heard before. What is this? She asked. An old song, he said. From a time when humans thought only of home, not war. Lyra closed her eyes. It sounds like hope, Ethan smiled. Maybe it is. But peace rarely lasted long on Orion. One afternoon, the colony's overseer Varric returned. He came with more guards, this time armed and determined. His boots hit the ground like thunder as he approached the workshop. Ethan Cole, he shouted. Open up. Ethan stepped outside, wiping his hands on a cloth. His eyes narrowed when he saw Varric's men. You again, Varric smirked. I gave you time to think. I'm here for the alien. She's not an object, Ethan said firmly. She works here now. She's free. There is no freedom for her kind, Varric said. The colony owns her, and if you don't hand her over, you'll lose your license and, maybe more. Ethan stood still for a moment, the wind carrying silence between them. Then he said quietly, You can take my license, but you can't take her. Varric's smirk vanished. He gestured to his men. Take them both, then. Before the guards could move, a voice called from nearby, Wait. It was a miner, a big man from the market, one of those who had once thrown stones at Lyra. He looked uneasy. Sir, maybe leave it. The girl didn't steal anything. We all saw what happened that day. Varric glared at him. And since when do miners question orders? Another worker stepped forward. Since we got tired of watching people get beaten for nothing, more colonists gathered, drawn by the noise. Ethan and Lyra stood in front of the workshop as the crowd grew. Varric looked around, realizing he was outnumbered. His voice dropped low with anger. "You think this ends here, Cole?" "You'll regret this." Ethan crossed his arms. "Maybe, but not today." Varric turned sharply and left with his men, their footsteps echoing down the street. When they were gone, the colonists stayed for a while, silent and unsure. Then one woman stepped forward and offered Lyra a small loaf of bread. "Sorry," she said softly. "For what we did before." Lyra blinked in surprise, then took the bread with shaking hands. "Thank you." Ethan watched the exchange quietly. He knew this was how change began, not with loud speeches, but with small acts of kindness. That night, the sky over Orion 9 glowed with stars. Ethan sat by the workshop window, watching the lights flicker. Lyra sat nearby, fixing a broken tool. "You didn't have to face him again," she said quietly. Ethan smiled faintly. "I've faced worse. And you're worth it." Lyra looked down, her heart beating fast. "No one has ever said that to me before." He leaned back in his chair. "Then maybe it's about time someone did." They stayed like that for a while, the silence filled only by the hum of old machines. It felt peaceful, but Ethan knew trouble wasn't over. Varric would return. Power never let go easily. The next morning, he found a note slipped under the workshop door. It read, "Leave before nightfall." "They're coming," Ethan frowned. "It's from someone inside the colony," he said. "They're warning us." Lyra's eyes widened. "Then we must go." He nodded slowly. "We'll pack what we can." They gathered tools, food, and a small solar battery. Lyra hesitated before leaving. She looked around the workshop, the place that had become her first home since the war. "Will we come back?" she asked. Ethan paused. "Maybe. But even if we don't, this place will remember us." By sunset, they reached the edge of the desert. The wind howled across the dunes. Behind them, the colony lights shimmered faintly in the distance. Ethan carried their supplies while Lyra followed close, her silver hair shining under the twin moons. They walked until the ground rose into rocky hills. There they found the remains of an old outpost, half buried, long abandoned. Ethan checked the walls. "It'll do for now." That night they built a small fire using scraps of metal and wire. The flames reflected in Lyra's eyes. She looked across at Ethan. "Do you ever get tired of fighting for others?" He poked the fire quietly. "All the time." "Then why do you still do it?" He looked up at her, his face calm but full of meaning. "Because someone once fought for me. I owe that to the next person." Lyra's gaze softened. "Then I will remember that. Someday, maybe I can do the same." For several days they stayed hidden in the outpost. Ethan repaired old transmitters to listen for signals. Lyra explored nearby caves and brought back supplies. Together, they worked like a small team, surviving through heat and dust storms. But the world was still watching. Varric had sent scouts to search the desert. He wanted them caught to prove his control and warn others not to defy him. One morning, Lyra spotted drones in the distance. She ran back to the outpost. "They found us." Ethan grabbed his small blaster, the same one he swore never to use again. "Then we hold them off. We don't run anymore." The drones came fast, their lights flashing. Ethan shot at their sensors, knocking two down. Lyra used a metal rod to smash another that got too close, but there were too many. Suddenly, the sound of engines roared from the horizon. A group of mining trucks appeared, driven by colonists. The same people who once hated Lyra now came to help. They formed a barrier around the outpost, blocking the drones with heavy shields. Ethan stared in disbelief. "Why are they here?" A miner shouted back, "Because we owe you, Cole. You made us remember what right means." Lyra stood beside him, heart racing. The humans she once feared were now protecting her. Together they fought back the drones until they all retreated into the dust. When silence returned, the miners cheered. One woman looked at Lyra and said, "Guess we're not all bad after all." Lyra smiled. "No, you're not." Word of the battle spread across the colonies. News traveled fast how one human stood for an alien girl and how kindness turned strangers into allies. The overseer's authority began to crumble. People started questioning his orders, refusing to obey unjust laws. A few weeks later, a transport ship from the capital arrived. New officials took control, removing Varric from power. Justice, slow but certain, had come. Ethan watched from afar as the colony changed. New rules were made: fair wages, equal rights, open trade. Aliens were no longer treated as tools, but as workers and neighbors. One evening, Alara came to him, holding a small metal badge. "They asked me to be part of the repair team," she said proudly. "To teach others what you taught me?" Ethan smiled. "You earned it." She looked at him with deep emotion. "I couldn't have without you." He shook his head gently. "You did it because you believed in yourself. That's what mattered." Months passed. The colony became brighter, safer, kinder. Ethan's workshop reopened, bigger than before. Lyra worked beside him, now confident and strong. Children came to watch them build machines that powered the new farms. One afternoon, as they stood outside watching the sun set, Lyra turned to him. "Do you ever think about leaving this planet?" He nodded. "Sometimes. There's a whole galaxy out there." She smiled. "Then maybe one day we'll see it together." He laughed softly. "Maybe we will." The wind carried their laughter across the fields. That night, as the stars appeared again, Lyra whispered softly, "When I first met you, I thought humans were cruel. But now I see. Humanity is something else. It's the choice to be kind even when it's hard." Ethan looked at her, his voice warm. "That's the only thing worth fighting for." They stood side by side beneath the twin moons, the dust swirling gently around them. From a single act of courage had grown a small revolution, not of weapons, but of hearts. And somewhere in the stars, the lost worlds watched, seeing how one human's kindness changed everything.